All right, everyone. I was assigned medieval women and family, so that's what we're going to talk about today. So, it's important to provide a little bit of context so that way we can really understand what I'm talking about. And as you can see, I have the times of the time periods listed on the screen. And even though our story really only takes place in the high and late Middle Ages, it's important to understand the early Middle Ages and how really the beliefs surrounding women and how their roles kind of changed and adapted a little bit. And then we have the three classes that we're going to be talking about. The nobility, they kind of enforced the classes of feudalism, and they were in charge of everything. And the next one is the church, made up of the clergy. They provided the people with the meaning of one's life and one's place in it. So they would kind of provide the ideologies that everyone in all three classes kind of took and shaped their life around. And then the third class is the lower class, made up of the serfs. And they worked under the nobility and the church, and they kind of did all the dirty work. They did everything for them. And so, another important part of the context is to understand some universal truths of the medieval women, that these tend to be true for all three classes. Um, no matter the differences that they had, they're true for all the women. So the first one being medieval women inherited their husband's trades and or assets after their husband's death. So even this could be just their husband goes away to war or they have to take care of some business, but this brings in the ideology of the lady of the manor where the woman would take care of everything, finances, she would keep her roles of being in the household and she would take up the husband's work. So if her husband was a baker, then she would become a baker when he was dead or when he was gone. Another truth is that typically the place of women was restricted to what was deemed socially acceptable. So, women don't really stray that far from what is their place or what was their place in society. So, those exceptions we do have are pretty notable, and you probably have heard of them, or we'll talk about them today. And so, another truth is that men made decisions for women, and this is pretty much in every facet of a woman's life. A man made a decision for her, and so that whether that be marriage or education or anything really, women didn't have a lot of autonomy. And then the last truth is that the woman's role tended to be to make children, assist her husband, and to take care of the home. And so this is true for all three classes, that women tended to die pretty young, like around 40 was the average lifespan, and babies died a lot. So you'd see medieval women making a bunch of babies because they're expected to lose at least one of them. So they'd have anywhere between 4 and 8 births. That doesn't mean 4 to 8 children. They'd probably have less than that just because children would die so often. So we're going to talk about nobility first. So a woman's position was determined by how much land they brought to marriage, and that land is in the form of a dowry. A dowry is like the money, goods, or property that was brought into marriage. And so, of course, if a woman has a bigger dowry, she has more power because land equals power. And so that means that the quality of life and autonomy varied greatly within nobility, because if a woman had a giant dowry, then she would have a lot more power. But if a woman had a smaller dowry, she would have a lot less power. And these women in the nobility, their main roles, again, were taking care of the household, but is a little different than the upper class because they had practical education. And this practical education was like learning etiquette and how to be a noble. And it was a little bit of like making food and taking care of the house, but not really. And sometimes you'd even see younger women before they got married, they'd be ladies in waiting to older women. And that kind of was seen as preparing to be married and preparing to take care of their husband and their family. And so there are very few exceptions of women straying from these niches, and